I wrote "Don't hit the third rail" because that would be how I would feel. Like the third rail, I feel like growing up in New York was like quicksand.
Don't hit the third rail.
Kicking and screaming.
I don't know, I've always thought that my parents were part of the trickle-down method of parenting, you know, like reflection on the Reagan years. Looked good to a lot of people, but basically I'm paying for all that neglect now.
Kicking and screaming came really as I graduated Vassar College, and I sort of came up with the idea that, like, if I hadn't left school, and what if I just stayed? Because I certainly understood the impulse of wanting to stay at where I was comfortable and not go out to the unknown. But another part of me makes that impossible. So that was sort of the concept for the movie. And I ended up making it, I guess I was 24, turning 25 when we made the movie. And which at the time I thought, oh, I've been grinding away trying to get this done. Everything is taken forever. You know, will I ever get this movie made? And of course, when I look back at it, I think how incredibly fast and incredibly young I was. And in a way, nobody that young should be trusted with the first film. I don't really believe that, but it was very much me inside that space, and really a lot of the people who made the movie with me being, you know, essentially the age of the people, a little bit older, that of the people that the movie was about. And so I was very close to, I mean, probably the first and only time I'll make a movie where I was essentially right there in the mindset of the characters in the movie. Weirdly, didn't really occur to me until the first day of shooting that I had never been on a movie set before. And I didn't know any of the protocol. And that was both positive, but I think there were also negatives to it, because then I would sort of accept what I was told one was supposed to do. Later, I realized actually I can do this more to my own comfort level, you know, and or how I might work best. I remember like the first day, like going to the catering truck, which already just seemed like an amazing thing to be happening, and the PA talking and saying they had eyes on me and thing, and I like laughed at it. It was like so ridiculous. But then I really had to kind of accept the fact that I was the boss of this movie and try to behave like one. But I really learned on the job, and I would say I've learned on the job in essentially every subsequent movie. I learned something new on, but that one was I remember looking at the dailies for the first time, and just the fact that they were in color and mostly in focus, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe, like, oh, that's an actual, looks like an actual movie up there, because that's when you project dailies also all the time in the, you know, on film, and I cut the movie on film also. I kind of couldn't believe it was happening while it was happening.
The paralysis is just gonna wait for you when you get. What are you writing?
Some notes.
Will you stop writing what I'm saying? Can we have one spontaneous conversation where my dialogue doesn't end up in your next story?
I did that actually this morning at breakfast. Somebody said something, and I said, I hope it's okay if I just write down what you just said, because I used to be better at remembering it. Now now, if I don't write it down, sometimes I'll excuse myself and go to the bathroom and speak it into my phone or something. There was a Norman Mailer short story called The Notebook, which it was in a collection, advertisements. Is it advertisements of myself? And in it, it's a couple, and they're having an argument, and the guy is writing everything down, and she's getting more and more frustrated. And I related to the story when I read it, and I thought it was such a great kind of dramatization of something like that. So I gave it to Jane in the movie. I also thought the idea that he's learning from her, that she's already got the confidence to do that, and sort of think of herself more seriously as an artist, I guess, and he's not yet at that place yet. Stupidity can be a good thing when you're young and when you're first, because you just don't know better. You're sort of, you're like too naive to fail in a way. I think part of me felt like I don't know, is this really a movie? Is this going to be is this is this a movie like the kind of movie that I go see in theaters? Will this be like that? Or is this some other movie that I'm making in some, alternate universe? I don't know. Yeah, it was like disbelief and also a real, strong ambition. The Squid and the Whale.
Mom, don't ruin the whole thing for me.
You'll win. If you don't win, something's wrong with them, which is probably the case, actually. People can be very stupid.
There was a gap in I made Kicking Screaming, and then I made Mr. Jealousy was my second film. And then I was having trouble getting a film made. But I think what really was also happening is that I hadn't quite found myself the way that I could more strongly communicate my ideas and my feelings and in a movie. I wasn't there yet. It was a line we put in Frances Ha where Josh Hamilton's character says, what do you do? And she says, it's kind of hard to answer. And he says, why? And she said,
because I don't really do it.
That's how I felt. Like I'd made 2 movies, but was I a filmmaker? But what happened in a positive way in that period is that I started going to therapy, and I think I lived some life, and I had some disappointment, and it led me to writing The Squid and the Whale. So by the time I made The Squid and the Whale, it was like the beginning of my career again. But now I was older, and I felt prepared. I could execute and communicate I think in a more clear way what was really sort of inside me.
I'm going to play lead guitar and do vocals on a song I wrote. Hey you, out there in the cold, getting lonely, getting old, can you feel me?
I use autobiography in my work a lot, and I draw from my life and things that have happened to me, but the movies and the are not autobiographical themselves. I mean, for instance, in The Squid and the Whale, he says that he wrote this Pink Floyd song, and that was actually something that a friend of mine in college told me about that happened to him. And he grew up, we're the Upper West Side, his parents were academics, and we sort of had similar shadow childhoods in a way, but we met in college. And when he told me that story, it wasn't a Pink Floyd song, but he told me the story how he told them, and he didn't perform it for the school. But he lied to his parents, and he in a sense, I was like, well, that did happen to me, even though it didn't happen to me. I recognized, it was so familiar to me. In a way, it all feels like it happened to me and didn't happen to me at all. So that the fact and the fiction is all just it stops. It only has meaning in that it makes this narrative of the movie feel true. And that's, I do find from it in the beginning stages of things, I like using real names of people I know, because when I first start writing, because I feel like, okay, I believe this person. Even never would write the actual person and use their name, but just, this is a real name in the world. I believe this person exists. I'm gonna use this name. And I don't know, there's so many examples of that and versions of that, I think, in what I do.
Dad's got you on Saturdays. You like his girlfriend?
Is she his girlfriend?
I love working with kids. But it's a challenge no matter how good and mature and easy a child is. It just takes a lot of focus, and also there are there are restrictions on time, and so there's a lot of doing things where you have to shoot the kid out and then turn around, and all the poor adults have to then act to nothing, to me reading off camera, But one of the things I love about it is what you're getting is something that it's existing in this time and space right there. This person at this age, because particularly, it's true of all of us, but, kids age so quickly, it's always like by the premiere, they're always like taller than I am. And certainly like 5 years goes by, which for me feels like, oh, we just made that movie. And then they're suddenly grown-ups. And like in The Squid and the Whale, but like Jesse and Owen both now have directed movies, and Hallie Pfeiffer is a playwright, and I think she's directed things, and that's really exciting. It's great. I mean, I actually learned when by working with kids, I often wouldn't tell them when the camera was rolling, because sometimes I would notice, like, if you said action, they would stiffen, like they would sort of get into performance mode. So what I would do is not say action and just say, like, when you're ready, and talk to them and have the camera roll, so that there wasn't really any separation between talking on and off camera, And I actually then just started to do that with everybody, and the adult actors too on my movies. As I stopped calling action, I mean, they'd obviously know the camera was rolling, but the kids would always get wise to it too. They'd be like, I see the lights on, and you'd be okay, well, but is just to sort of, to really try for there not to be any barrier really between on and off camera and what's in the movie and what's out of the movie, and that you and I could be just talking right now, and then I could go right into a scripted sequence, and that it would be all part of, the same energy and the same kind of dynamic. Frances Ha.
You're going to be a single guy with 2 cats.
Why would I be single?
With 2 cats.
No, I know. I mean, why would I be single?
I don't know.
With Frances Ha, Greta and I had worked together. She had acted in Greenberg, and I wanted to work with her again as an actor, but for some reason, I hadn't read anything that she had written. I found out later that she was a writer in college and wanted to be a writer and everything, but I didn't actually know that specifically. But I just felt like it'd be great to write something with her, for her to do. I mean, the only times I've really collaborated, which were with Greta, and I wrote with Wes Anderson, and I wrote with Emily Mortimer on J. Kelly, and is that there's something, it is an extension of a friendship and of a relationship, but I find that something, it's like I like me when I'm with these people. And so not only are they bringing all their brilliance to it, but I'm more inspired. I find myself, that's the best way to say it, I guess, is that I like me. And there's people you meet where you're like, I like this person, I have no chemistry with them, I can't find myself into this conversation, and then other people you just very easily, every time you see them, you don't even know them that well, and then you just start to have these. And I remember being, I felt that with Greta immediately, that we had we recognized something in each other. And I think Frances Ha has a particular magic about it that really came from some third thing between her and me. And, it was my love for her, and shooting the movie, I think, is probably clear in the directing of the movie, and her, and she's so special in the movie as an actor. But I think the sort of the invention of it was this third energy, which has been true, I think, on all the things we've done together.
I have to shadow this woman. She's my ward.
The joy in Frances Ha emanates from Greta. The light that she emits in that movie. I remember Sam Levy, the cinematographer who shot it with me, said something like, she is a light. Like, we don't even have to light her. She lights herself. And it was true. And I think, and it was a joyful experience making the movie. And that doesn't always translate to inside the movie, but I think in that case it did. There was something where we all really liked being there. And Greta and I in particular never wanted to stop. I mean, there was one point where somebody said to us, because of the way we shot the movie, we shot it sort of off the radar, and so, but I remember someone very politely pointed out, they said, we've shot for 18 straight days. And Greta and I were like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Like I had no idea. I just loved being there. And so we were like, yeah, please, let's take a weekend and everybody can go do their laundry. But that's how it felt making that movie.
I could have moved in with Dan.
Not if you broke up.
That's why we broke up.
Really?
No.
That was the whole thing with that movie. It was sort of, if we don't tell anyone we're doing this, then we don't need permission to do anything. It was all like, we'll ask for forgiveness. I mean, we shot whole scenes on the subway over several different days, and I reshot scenes on the subway. Like, I kept restaging things too, because I thought, oh, maybe that was maybe it should be on the platform. No, maybe it should be in the car. And again, that was a kind of energy that the movie has, that those things don't feel staged, that this fiction is taking place in very much a kind of uncontrollable real New York City. If you can capture that in a movie, I think it always gives it a kind of great energy.
Whose idea was it that she pee on the subway tracks?
That was, I think, her idea. I think something she maybe, or a friend maybe had done. I don't know.
Don't hit the third rail.
I wrote, don't hit the third rail, because that would be how I would feel, like, don't electrocute. I was always, I grew up, the third rail, I feel like growing up in New York was like quicksand. It was like one of those things like, don't go into quicksand. Don't touch the third rail. Like you grew up knowing about that. Marriage Story.
Can I say something?
It was good. It's edgy. Directed by her husband, supposedly very controlling.
We're lucky to have her.
I'm surprised she said yes.
We can thank her divorce.
I went through divorce, and it was an incredibly hard time in my life. I think one of the things that's interesting about something like divorce or a breakup in a way is that, I mean, on one hand, it's essentially aspirational, in that you're choosing to change your life. Essentially getting together is aspirational and in a different way. And you go into something, it's sort of, what a beautiful thing. These two people thought that this was going to be their whole life. And how can we blame them that it didn't go that way? But then going through this process where it's all about blame, and you've done a terrible thing, and you're going to lose you're not going to be able to see your child in the same way, or you're going to, it's going to cost money. It's going to be, all these things that enter into it. Just seems like in some ways such a kind of preposterous, horrific thing. And yet it's so ordinary, and what 50% of people or of married couples, or whatever the statistic is. And so that struck me in a way. I mean, I went through it, but I also thought, well, is a marriage a failure just because it doesn't work out? And I don't think it is. And I think, or certainly doesn't have to be. And in the movie, I don't think it is. And yet they're made to feel like the system essentially makes them feel like that. So I thought, well, I mean, it's such a loaded thing, but I did feel like there could be a really great movie in that. And essentially to tell a love story, but sort of in its absence. Or in its disintegration.
Do you understand why I want to stay in LA?
No.
Well, that's not, Charlie, that's not a useful way for us to start.
I don't understand it.
You don't remember promising that we could do time here?
We discussed things.
It's a long scene, and we shot it over 2 days. So it really was broken down almost into it had its sort of own story or narrative in a way. So like, here they are, where it starts, where they go, where it goes here, then it goes over here, then it goes back over to where they started. And that came from rehearsing with Adam and Scarlett, and first on just, taping out in a thing. And then we rehearsed on the location before we started shooting. And then, of course, when we were shooting, it developed its own things. The challenge of it is that it needed to be broken up somewhat, because also it was over 2 days. But I also wanted to shoot it as continuously as I could, because they needed the momentum and the space to keep going. As a result, we kind of had to do most of the scene almost every take, which was exhausting for them. It was a real location because we didn't have money to build a set. Otherwise, it would have been a great candidate to build a set there. And I had a very specific idea of how I wanted it to look, because I wanted it to have, which we ultimately found, but I wanted it to have a sort of half open kitchen to the living room, but that had a divider part way, so that I could shoot in a kind of split screen way, two people having conversations on either side of this sort of divider. yeah, I mean, it's something if we were able to build it, we would have had more freedom to kind of move around and take out walls and probably get a crane head in and stuff. But then the location always gives you something else. Like, because the hallway to the back room, his bedroom is quite narrow. There was no way we could follow anybody really through there. So at a certain point, Adam's character just sort of goes and disappears and leaves camera for a while, you know, and then she says something and he comes running back in, and, you know, and that blocking was really strong. And again, if you have all the freedom you want, maybe we wouldn't have chosen to do it that way. It was a lot for them. I mean, it was a lot for them. It was a lot for me. At the same time, as a director, you're both feeling sort of overwhelmed by it, but also there's another part is thinking like, good. You know, you're this is what this has to be. It has to be this way. There was definitely takes at the end where we had to stop and give people a break, because it was, you know, it's as a director, you also feel a certain responsibility because you're asking people to go to places that are very vulnerable. And I have so much love for actors that they do that and can do that and will do that in front of cameras and crew and do it while also getting the lines exactly right and the blocking exactly right. I mean, it's like they're doing things on so many different levels. It's also a pleasure of the job is to getting to work with people who can do that while we're young.
Yeah, I know what traditional arthritis is, but
I'm not sure what you mean by traditional, but this is arthritis.
Arthritis?
Yes. I usually just say it once.
Probably the first movie I made, which is, it starts to be about realizing you're not the youngest person in the room anymore. I would say that's one of the more of like lines from my movies that people will maybe bring back to me when he says arthritis, you know. But that thing, I remember having that feeling of like, you know, like, why I put this thing on my knuckle, and you know, like, and you think, oh, this is something we thought a lot about with J. Kelly too, but that kind of startling realization that the human experience is also your own experience.
It's weird aging, right? It's like, what the fuck is going on?
I know. Youth is wasted on the young.
I'd go further. I'd go, life is wasted on people.
Greenberg is the first time where he has a whole rant about young people. So that's true. While We're Young is kind of a companion to that, I guess. I think about Losing My Edge and would be less about feeling about how I actually feel about young people. Or people in general, I have great affection for. It's more about feeling yourself, like realizing your references aren't their references anymore. And this thing of, you know, they don't make them like they used to, or, you know, back in my day, or, you know, I mean, you know, all the crap that you heard said when, and of course, once you reach a certain age, you start to think like, but I'm right. You know, like, actually it was better when I was, you know, my parents' generation, I don't know, but you know, and I suppose this is just the things we tell ourselves. But I do think I'm right. I mean, I do think the world of record stores and bookstores was a better world than the internet. J. Kelly.
You know, I'm having a tribute in Tuscany on Saturday, and you all should come.
Talk to my publicist, Liz, right there. What time, Jack? I'll see you all in Tuscany. Not even answer,
If an actor is good in a way, they are revealing themselves in something that's not them. Yes, of course, then the question is, well, then who are they when they're not playing somebody else, which is sort of, you know, we've heard that question about actors before. But I was also interested in terms of J. Kelly, in terms of the notion of like a movie star, because a movie star is an actor, so of course they're playing parts, but they're also a character in the culture. Part of what we love about movie stars is that we like going to see them. We find that we like watching them so much, and so that they're a great vessel for all these stories. Comedies, dramas, action, whatever the thing is. It's like, oh, I love seeing this person do that. So then I thought, well, what if, in a sense, like, what if then the movie star is essentially revealing a humanity that is our own, and what's that hall of mirrors? And that the movie, in a sense, was about somebody who begins as a movie star and then ends up as a human being in some way, or starts as another character and then ends up as themselves. That was sort of, I suppose, I've never quite said it that way, but I think that's maybe a good way to describe J. Kelly.
How can I play people when I don't see people, touch people?
Don't touch people.
I felt like George would be great for it because, there weren't many people who could do it, because I think it did need to be a movie star playing J. Kelly. This is a character on one hand who is deflecting. He's so good at performance. So he's very good at sort of outrunning the problem. And he's very charming at doing it. It's part of the thing about the movie is that I wanted it to feel like a pleasure in so many ways, because it is a pleasure watching a movie star be winning and be themselves. But at the same time, there are all these sort of headwinds that are coming, these memories, this sort of, that as we know, you can't outrun yourself, and at some point you're going to have to meet yourself on the other side of whatever this adventure is. These cracks are starting to show, and it's actually a very vulnerable performance, because he starts to reveal himself in this character as the movie continues to go, and until all the way towards the end, where essentially I feel like he's kind of stripped of everything. I put together the clip reel with Mark Woolen, who's also brilliant trailer maker. And I wanted to use George's movies. George and I never really discussed it, but he knew it was going to happen. And so on the day, he came and he sat down and I said, okay, I'm going to play the reel for you and we're going to film you. And his reaction is the real reaction that's in the movie, and all the way down to the last line of the movie. Like, that is from that first take of George seeing his life actually flash before his eyes.
I said I'm suddenly remembering things. What is that?
Memory?
Well, yes.
Maybe your memory's trying to tell you something about your present.
Like what?
I don't know. I'm tired.
I've known Adam quite well since he was in Meyerowitz Stories, and I love him. And he is such, there's such warmth and generosity and loyalty. And so when we were writing Ron, I felt like this was a character actually that could be quite close to Adam, even though Adam in real life is J. Kelly. But that sort of caretaking side of Adam could be something that I thought would be very touching. And also, it's also, I think, a funny character. He's like pulled in all these different directions, and it's like, like trying to be many things to many different people. And I just felt like Adam and George just felt like an interesting combination. And because I felt this way about the two men, I thought, well, probably they'll feel the same way about each other. And they really did. It was very sweet watching them together, because they were very bonded throughout the movie. And they would play basketball and things together, but they were just between takes would just be sitting and laughing and hanging out with each other. George Clooney is the one who brought the Sharpie. That's one thing I did not have in the script. I had in the script that he would have the black eye covered up and that he would sort of put himself back into his sort of, J. Kelly outfit, in some ways, to like repurpose himself after he's had a sort of maybe comes after a sort of more vulnerable memory and time in his life. It's like, all right, let's put the mask back on. And George was the one who said, what you might be interested in is that I actually color my eyebrows with just a Sharpie. That might be something interesting. He's like, use it or don't. I was like, I'm definitely using that. So I would watch him do it in life, and then we would do it again on camera.